And welcome back to Lesson 3 of the 3D Rad Tutorial Series 1, where we are introducing you to the software and teaching you how to use it. Now, if you got past Lesson 2, the Terrain Car Syndrome, you are on your way, because in this lesson, I'm going to take you on a little tour through the toolbox so that you can see all of the options that you have available to you right from the start, right out of the box. And the possibilities go beyond this, by the way. I'm just showing you what's already available so that you can enjoy it. So we go to Object Add, and as you remember, this window opens. This is your toolbox. And what I'm going to do briefly is go over each of these objects and give you a brief description of what they do, so that you can better tune the ideas that you have to think, oh, maybe I could use that, or I could use that. Alright, so the first one in the list is the Airfoil. And basically what this object does is if you link it to something that you have and it has velocity, you are going to be able to make airplanes. You're going to give whatever object you create flight potential. So if anybody is into flight sims or you just want to make something fly, Airfoil is the way to go. The next object in the list is animation controls. And this object is basically designed to give you some default controls that you can use for animations for characters or different objects in your scene. So it's very useful. The next object is ball. And this object is basically a special kind of physics object, or rigid body as it's called, that will allow you to use ball physics and understand. You could even use this to make planets or whatever kind of spherical objects you might need, because you can change the texture on this to be able to make it represent pretty much anything you want. The next one is Buoy. With this object, you give the ability for the objects you put in your game to float essentially on water, or any surface for that matter. So now you can make boats or just whatever you want to float on a surface, maybe a hovercraft, or like we got water dynamics, so you can make different kinds of boats, and the buoy is the object that you need for that. The next two objects are similar. The first one is the cam first person. Now, I don't know about you, but once you hear that word first person, you think, oh man, first person shooter, first person FPS game, this is sweet. And yes, the first person cam is a great way to get yourself right into first person game and first person shooter development. The second type of camera is called cam chase, and this camera is more for follow cameras or stationary cameras that will look in a certain direction. Basically, the cam chase is used for the cameras that you will have in your scene, or if you want to make cameras that follow cutscenes in real time, that's what your cam chase is very useful for. Cam first person and cam chase are similar, but they do have different properties that makes them stand out. The next object, which you've already been introduced to, is the car, and the car is set up with basic car physics, and there's also many different kinds of cars that you can choose from, all with unique physics settings and wheel dynamics and things of that nature. The one next to that is the car AI. So now if you're thinking about a racing game, this is a very useful item, because now you can give the other cars in your project intelligence. They can follow a path, and now you can race them. The next object we have is the character. Now, this character isn't actually the geometry for a character that you see like in an open world game, but this character object you can link to other objects, and it will enable the ability to have controls over a character, like the mouse look or the keyboard controls for different things. So, very useful object. The next one is the configure controls object, and this one is interesting because this is a built-in system for you to be able to give the player to customize their controls. Now, in all honesty, it's not the greatest way to do it, because it's not like a menu system like you see in most modern games where you just, there's a whole list and you click the one you want and then you change it. This one does it in a sequence kind of style, But it works, and it's good if you want to test out controls for multiple input devices, because this program does support keyboard, mouse, and joystick inputs. The next object we have is the counter. And this object is interesting because it allows you to basically use a counting system or a progressive number system or a level system or a score system without having to write any code for it. The counter will allow you to have access to that, so you're not writing scripts for all of the numeric parts of the game. The next, 7 objects are all in the event category. Okay, and I'll briefly tell you that all 7 of these items have slightly different properties and do slightly different things, but are all equally very useful. Some of them are for 2D, some of them are for 3D, or a combination of the two. But we have event on contact, which literally means when 2 objects contact each other, or one object contacts another, something happens. The next is an event on input. This is so if you have a keyboard entry or a mouse click, this will trigger something to happen. Then you have event on location, which is where you set up a physical region in your space, and when you enter that region with another object, something happens. Then we have event on object ID, and this one I don't use so much, but basically every object in your list has an ID attached to it, and you can use this to make certain events happen when certain objects with that ID are present. This is also useful when you have an imposter situation. Event on proximity is similar to event on location, but the proximity value is more of a vector. So if your object is within a certain distance of another object, something will happen. Then we have event on value, which basically means if a certain value is reached, something will happen. Again, you can couple that with, like, say, the counter. So if you're in an event on contact, so every time you strike something, the counter value goes up, and if it hits a certain value, then something will happen. Like if you strike an enemy a few times, it'll die. So that's how these kind of things work. And then finally we have the event timer, which basically that's pretty much what it does. It's a timer system that's set up so that you can do timed things. Well, it says timer, so that's pretty much it. The next object we have is exit fade. Exit fade is both a way to fade out and fade in your projects for fading effects, and it also allows you to connect your projects together through loading screens. So now you have a level, and then you beat the level, and then you exit fade, and it starts the next level, or it goes back to the main menu. So exit fade is a really good one. The next object is fog, and fog is a pretty simple object that allows you to do fog effects in your game. Fog is also useful so that you can, beyond a certain point, not render geometry to save on memory. So it's very useful. The next object here is force. This one's a lot of fun, and it does just what it says. You have a force and a vector, and this object allows you to apply forces to the objects in your game world. Force feedback is also interesting because it's pretty self-explanatory what it does, but it allows you to give feedback to certain devices that might have that feature so that you can make the game more immersive and more interactive. Next one we've already talked about, which is GForce, and this basically enables physics for your game. The GForce is a gravitational constant, but it can be changed to pretty much whatever value you want, however far you want, and it can also be made radial so that you can do gravity on spherical objects. The next object is interesting because it's more of an assistance object, and it's called group. And when you add a group object to your scene, you can link this object to other objects. And let's say I had the car and I had a camera, and that car had wheel meshes attached to it, and you've got all these objects that are for this one group of objects. When you choose the group object, you can manipulate that in the space, and all the objects connected to it will move with it. So it's a nice way to link multiple objects together and kind of group them so that they all move as one unit, but they still behave individually. The next object we have is GUI Window. This is a special function that allows you to change the manipulation, like the translation and rotation of an object. One thing about this is it's not really customizable, but it is a great tool you can use to visualize different aspects of the models you're working with. The next object, which is really interesting, is the Highway Construction Kit. In this one, there are a whole bunch of predefined pieces of road that have been built into this game, and the Highway Construction Kit allows you to connect all these pieces together so you can make racetracks or whatever, but mainly racetracks. So Highway Construction Kit is really cool that you can experiment with. The next object we have is the Imposter. This is also a really useful one, because imposters, generally what they are is references of an original object that you've created that you can place anywhere you want and cut down on the amount of memory you're using. If you had 10 objects that had complex geometry and you all loaded them into the program, you would use a lot more virtual memory than if you loaded one and made all the other 9 imposters or references of that original object. The next object is Joint. This is a cool feature when you're messing with physics. You can connect models together with joints, and those joints can have a certain strength. The joints can rotate around a certain axis, and you can have all kinds of fun with that. The next object is Particles. This is another great one, adding particle effects to your game. Particles are all over the place. You can use particle effects to make explosions, or you can make them to cause, when you want to do area damage in an RPG, you can use a particle to show that visually. Particles can be the exhaust on a car. They can be the wind coming off of plane wings. Just particles are just so many different uses for them, and they're completely customizable. You can make your own particle images. It's just a great tool. And the next one I want to go over, because this is it's like part A of 2 for lesson 3, since I don't want to use up too much time. And this is the path object. The path object allows you to create predefined paths that almost any object in your game can follow. Paths can be used to make cameras follow a certain path, your car AI, or other characters, enemies. Paths are really useful, and that's what they do. And since the next one is similar, is the Pathfinder, which is an object that lets you set up, I guess you could say, intelligence for objects to be able to find paths, so they're not just running into walls or falling off of cliffs. They actually have some manner of intelligence. So that's all for this video. In the next video, I'm going to pick right up where we left off, and we're going to finish the rest of this toolbox. And if the sugar plums aren't dancing yet, don't worry, they will be. So I thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you in lesson 3B.